Dear organizers, dear honorable guests, dear participants of this Minsk forum, as you heard, my name is Kryscina Šyjanok. I'm the head of Office of Belarus Democratic Forces in the Czech Republic, but today I'm in the role of moderator. And my first step will be to invite the speakers of this panel discussion and introduce them. So please meet Mr. Knut Abraham from CDU group and also group of Friends of Belarus here in Germany.
Good afternoon.
Irina McLean, deputy head of the representative of the United Transitional Cabinet for social issues and social policies. Valeriy Kavaleuski, the head of Euro-Atlantic Affairs Agency, chair. And Andrej Stryzhak, yeah, he's here, the head of BYSOL Foundation. Well, the topic of our today's panel discussion is not an easy one because it consists actually of two topics, as you can see, dealing with questions concerning political prisoners and upcoming regime elections. So we are going to speak about two issues, actually, about so-called elections that will be held obviously in January 2025 in Belarus, and the situation of political prisoners, steps that could be done for releasing political prisoners, and probably we can have some time to touch some specific questions as foreigners as political prisoners in Belarusian prisons, and also providing help after political prisoners are released in those conditions in which we are right now. To start, I suggest to our panelists to speak probably up to 5 minutes on the question, what is your perception of the upcoming so-called presidential elections, which the citizen of Belarus, Alexander Lukashenko, announced for the 26th of January 2025? Are these elections that for now look like a special military operation going to change anything? As Lukashenko will obviously fabricate his victory, and on paper he will be the winner as many times before. And how these elections should be referred by the West, referred by our democratic forces in exile, and referred by civic society of Belarus.
Okay. Is this working? Oh yes, it is working. Probably by alphabetic order. So my family name is Abraham, and so I'm used to be the first in row since school times. As it was mentioned, I'm representing not only the Christian Democrats in Parliament, but I think after Robin couldn't make it because of all these election preparations we are having right now in Germany, and this is, by the way, also an idea we should discuss. What does the German elections mean to Belarus? To Belarus proper and Lukashenko Belarus and democratic Belarus. Maybe we can discuss that too. So I'm representing this group, Friends of Democratic Belarus, in the German Bundestag, and we are quite proud that we managed to do that, even in times of harsh confrontation in our inner political situation, that we managed to form this group of friends. This is not just an idea. We have proven that we do work together when it comes to Belarus. We have 2 identical resolutions ratified by the Parliament, And it is Robin Wagner from the Green Party, whom you know, Johannes Schraps from the Social Democrats, Anniko Glogowski-Martin from the Liberals, and me from the Christian Democrats. And not only that, but mainly with the help of the political foundations in Germany, we had in the Konrad Adenauer Foundation, and so I'm very happy to see Ms. Baumann here, we had a meeting not only of our group of Friends of Democratic Belarus, but also of all friendship groups in Europe, including the European level, here in a year ago, I think it was in November. So this has really proven to have shown it works once you have people who really engage themselves. So now, just a few remarks. I'm sure we'll go into details on the elections. I spare you from so-called elections. So this is always, if I say elections, always so-called elections. When we talk about Belarus, the other elections will probably be okay. There is not a situation, any situation I can imagine that we could state anything like fair and free elections in Belarus. So this is simply, given the history of this man, it is not possible for me to imagine a situation like that. And there, the past and present plays a big role. After all what has happened in the last 35 years, 30 years. It wouldn't even be enough to have better situation. Too much, too many crimes, too many human rights abuses and violations of the rights have happened. So this is a situation I cannot really foresee. And we have to make very clear what European standards are. European standards. It's not Christian democratic standards, German standards, French, Polish, whatever standards. It's European standards. What would European standards mean for elections in Belarus? And this is the level we should check. And on the other hand, I think it is very important that we keep the diplomatic presence in Minsk, that we have feet on the ground to see how the situation really is. And we have to, and we have discussed it very, very often, we have to see, of course, this election date is a date in the history of your country and of our neighbor country. So we cannot even simply ignore it. Yeah, the question is on the table. What does this mean for the future cooperation with the democratic forces? And we have, and I think in a way this conference is about that, have to find a definition on how to proceed. And this is still open, I have to confess. There's not. I haven't seen a paper or so dealing with that question. Maybe that for the start, and I pass the mic on alphabetic order or
to Irina.
Okay.
To Irina McLean.
I'll take a minute.
Okay. Thank you, Knut, for good intro into this complicated subject. There is no question, again, there is no expectation that democratic countries would recognize the outcome of those elections in Belarus on January 26. We also, when we speak about legitimacy and recognition, I think we should also separate these two concepts. Legitimacy is provided by Belarusian people. So anybody who wants to be a legitimate leader of Belarus have to win the elections in Belarus in free and fair fight. So in free and fair political competition. However, what the international community can do, provide international recognition to such a political force. And in this regard, of course, we understand that there are many cases in the world when leaders are not democratic, they are not elected democratically, but they're still recognized by the international community as a de facto force, even if it's a very unpleasant force. However, just to underscore that legitimacy is not provided by the international community to somebody who would be elected by the Belarusian people. These elections, as far as they kind of very clear about the outcome and about the reaction from the international community, still have very many open questions about the further steps, the further trajectory for the democratic movement, what it means for us, how we develop, what would be further strategy for ourselves. And before we do that, we still have to answer questions: what worked, what hasn't worked by the democratic movement, what were the achievements, what were the losses. And we have to have a very open and honest conversation among ourselves, because not only Lukashenko tries to turn the page for 2020, to sort of close his trauma of 2020, we also see that the context is changing fast. There are many variables which are very complicated. We're talking about the ongoing war in Ukraine and the situation on the battlefield that is quite complicated. The peace process that is coming our way, and this peace deal might or might not include Belarusian agenda in this. It is very important for us to ensure that Belarusian interests are also factored in. We also see the change in political landscape in the world and in the countries that are very important for democratic Belarus. The United States in particular, Germany, Lithuania, Austria, Poland. The European Commission has been just formed, and the new European Parliament composition has just been formed. And so this will be a new environment. Not completely new, but nevertheless there are new people, new faces. Some of them don't have much of understanding about 2020, so they're open book, and we have to educate them about what is happening in Belarus and what we can do about it at the moment. But I think it is the period before elections is less about Lukashenko and less about his legitimacy, because he will have none. But it is about the democratic forces and their impact, which has been in many regards weakened on the ground. And what we need to do to ensure that it is strengthened, it is returned to the political map, and we can do better in this regard to influence the situation in Belarus. Thank you.
So I'm strongly support Valeriy in point of that new forces, new political forces in Europe and US don't understand till end what we have in Belarus in this moment, and it's very important to be clear in definitions. It's not elections; it's a special election operation. It's like a war operation in which this guy want to refill own power in the next 5 years. It's not some process like election in a normal way. The second thing is that it's very important to say that in Belarus is not repression. In Belarus it's a terror. It's terror against civil society, against people who are not agreed with such called power, and we see increasing of this terror. It's a new methods, it's a new target groups. They fighting against relatives of political prisoners, for example, against families of political prisoners. They taking in jail people just only for some receiving of help from Belarusian diaspora, for example. And it's new challenges for us. And when we are saying it's repression, new people just looking, okay, repression, it's something like not such terrible and something, so it's not such interesting for us. When we are saying that it's terror, they can think more about the situation. For example, status incommunicado. It's a very nice word, but nobody understands what is it. It's a violated disappearing of people. These people, we don't know what with these people. They are alive or they are dead. In which place they are in this moment are staying. And for us, it's very important to say it's clearly also for foreigners and also for us inside country. Because I see that after 4 years of this big confrontation inside of our country, this cold war, cold civic war, what we see some interesting effects that many people don't looking in this in own security when they are in the country. They thinking that okay, 4 years it's ago, and I think that it's okay. Nobody remember about my participation in some meetings, some rallies in 2020, and it's very unsecure doing, because these people going to jail and for a long time. It's not like in the 2020 when people have a couple of years of detention, of sentence for such dealing. Now they have tracked it like terrorist, extremist, and have 6, 8, 10, 12 years of jail. We look for this situation in September, for example, when we see that investigative committee provide a new criminal case against some network of such called courtyard communities. It's people who just meeting for drinking some tea or not tea and discussing about own life, how you can fix chairs in your garden or something so. Okay, of course not only, but it's not about some extremist or terrorist activity. But now they tracked it like terrorist, extremists, and traitors of country, of power. And for us, it's very important to understand that the same activity, like in previous time in Belarus, now is tracked much strongly, and it's a very big, complicated situation for us to help for these people, to invite these people to some activity. And when somebody says, it's normal in Belarus, it's quiet in Belarus, nobody protests against this. Nobody protests, because it's a big time of jail. When you're going to street or saying something in internet or for your neighbors or something. So, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you to Andrej for raising the issue about people. In my role in the United Transitional Cabinet, I see my role very non-political and more as my professional role as a social worker and as a researcher. And what I really want to urge our international partners and colleagues is to remember about people with the upcoming elections. The history says that every time, every 4 years or so, what Andrej called not repressions, but terror increases. So during those times, the pain of people and the danger for people in Belarus increases. So for our international partners, and exactly what Valeriy, you said about a question of legitimacy and the question of non-recognition, this is extremely important. However, what we need to remember during January and after January, highlighting people's stories. What Andrej said about describing what is happening, documenting what is happening, and making sure that people stay safe. Svetlana Tikhanovskaya called to not take part in or not organize any protests during those times, because she does care about people. She does worry that the level of terror will become absolutely unbearable during those times. So on international level of support, I really urge everybody who is involved to remember about people during these times. Thank you.
As well as I come from Czechia, I can't resist temptation and want to mention one of our recent achievements there. The Foreign Committee of the Parliament of Czechia, the first one, adopted 3 weeks ago a resolution in support of political prisoners in Belarus. It has 4 articles, and the very last article of this resolution emphasizes, let me quote, that the holding of the presidential elections, which were announced on January 26, 2025 in the Republic of Belarus, under current conditions where candidates from previous presidential elections held on August 9, 2020 are still unjustly imprisoned is unacceptable, and the results of these elections cannot be considered legitimate. Mr. Abraham, do you see any chances to adopt similar resolution in the Committee of Foreign Affairs here in Bundestag?
Well, I think what the text says is shared by an overwhelming majority of colleagues. What I'm not so sure about is whether that would go into a resolution. I could think of a situation in which that happens, because it again, the text expresses the approach of many of my colleagues. The question is it necessary, and what do we achieve by really putting it into a parliamentary resolution? And the question we have to answer is by that. I think no doubt on stating that this is the case. But what, in my opinion, is missing in that is an idea of the way forward. So, okay, if a German parliament or a Czech parliament is saying we don't see these elections, whatever that is, legitimate, so it's not legitimate, how do we proceed in technical and diplomatic contacts to the regime, and how do we proceed in our political contacts with the democratic forces? And I think a resolution needs two sides: a clear statement on what is happening and a vision on how to proceed in future. And let me just use this opportunity for two thoughts. What is he trying to do at the moment? We of course see and we welcome that certain political prisoners are free, if you can say free, because they will have the burden of their memories of these years in prison, and you never know what the conditions really are. I do not put anyone under suspicion, but what we know about the circumstances in the prisons is so brutal and so unbelievable that I wouldn't exclude anything on that. So, but on a positive note, we see and we welcome, of course, the release of certain political prisoners. This is, of course, good, and we should say that. That's good. But again, this is only one part. We should simultaneously state what we expect of him and the regime to do further. And we have to be very clear with that, because it's sorry to say that, and it's not very diplomatic, but it's a kind of a bazaar for him. So he is giving out some releases, and now he is expecting something of us. What would that be? That might affect the elections, that we somehow accept that. But I think he is more playing on having a role in what you mentioned and Valeriy, you on whatever process in Ukraine. And as you remember, I was a civil servant, a diplomat in the Merkel administration, in the Chancellery, and of course we remember the Minsk agreements. And I could think of him wanting a similar role in whatever comes. And this I really cannot see. You can never exclude anything, never. But that would be too cheap. to treat some of the hundreds and thousands of people who are suffering and release prominent or less prominent or whoever, and expect, okay, you are rewarded with a central role in the peace process. I wouldn't exclude anything, but this we should make clear that we see his intentions with that. Maybe I leave it here.
Thank you. As it was mentioned during the first panel, last few months, 140 political prisoners been released. We read about it in the news. We get this information from their family members, from them personally, because some of them left the country. My next question will be to Andrej Stryzhak as the head of BYSOL Foundation, which also provides so-called evacuations for those who need to escape Belarus. Do human rights defenders and those who are somehow involved in the field in this evacuation process believe that this marks the beginning of the end of the mass repressions, that Lukashenko releases political prisoners, and have these repressions somehow stopped? At which extent in the recent months, or the situation is quite opposite? You have already mentioned the case of courtyards, and probably you can develop this thought about terror.
Yeah, it's very important question, because Knut already said about people are really released from jails, or they are inside jails. And the next point that these people are not only inside jails. I mentioned this destroyed physics and psychics of these people, but they cannot make many things what we can make like free people. For example, it's a strong control under your personality after this jail. You checked by police every time, and in night and by day. It's strongly prohibited to have some contacts, unsecure contacts with, for example, my organization or something. So, of course, it's a prohibition of crossing of borders. It's unlawful, totally unlawful process, because in a Belarusian law, we don't have some prohibition for such type of activity, but we have it in the moment. And these people are very scared for some possibility to return in these places, because jail is the worst place in their lives, and it's not some fantasy, because we see situation in which people who was once taken to jail by political reasons, they can go in second time and third time, because investigative committee and KGB just making new criminal cases and new cases in which you can be invited like some person. For us, it's very important to understand that this few months, which we are in facing of this special election operation, we are waiting for increasing of pressure, of terror, of repressions. Big questions for us that in the last wave we don't see some huge increasing of applications for evacuation. For why? Because these people don't going out from cabinet of investigative committee. They're going to jail and sitting in jail. Or for short-term detention, or for long-term detention, like investigative prison. We don't see these people because they cannot going out. And for this reason, we don't see a huge increase of some evacuation application. The second thing that power understands that visibility of terror, it's a possibility and dangerous for power, because If you show in such called покаянные video, it's in which people just saying, I'm a terrorist, I'm extremist and something so. And when you explain about this situation through YouTube, everybody can see this. Europeans can see this. European politics can see this. And they understand, okay, it's nothing changed in Belarus. And still repression, terror, and something else. When you are cut at this activity, nobody knows about it. And it's more clear to provide some pictures that in Belarus is quiet. And I think that government changed own strategy, and they trying to hide this wave of terror. And second thing, what I can say about this situation is that we have strong pressure on families and relatives of political prisoners, and it's strongly prohibited to say that your relative sitting in jail for abroad, for example, for media or for social media or something so. And they just saying, if you are say that your relative is in jail, you are going to jail too. And it's just strategy for hiding of this wave of tortures and of terror in our country, and to trying to show we have a new elections, we have a new situation with some concurrency in some competition in these elections. We have one more woman in this election competition, and you know, it's very big and problematic for how Valeriy say a new wave of politicians in Europe and US. Because if you don't know about the situation in general, you can trust this picture. And for us, it's very important to explain about this. Nothing changed in Belarus. It's a stronger repression, it's a wave of terror, and it's nothing to release. Yeah.
Thank you. I think my next question will go to Irina McLean, and we will deal with some numbers. According to Vesna, today there are at least 1,296 political prisoners in Belarus, but as far as we know, there are not that many sanctions which were imposed on Belarus because of these human rights violations, because of the fact that there are so many political prisoners. Most sanctions are related to the participation of Lukashenko's regime or Lukashenko's Belarus in the Russian aggression against Ukraine, and previously because of this hijacking of Ryanair, which had people from the EU countries on its board. So in the perspective of the United Transitional Cabinet and your representative for social questions, if there is any need to call for sanctions for human rights violations, or the existing sanctions are enough, should politicians call for that, or it's more the question to the Belarusian society?
Thank you, Kryscina. Really difficult but important question, and I think it becomes and often becomes an elephant in the room for many of us. As a social worker, I'm used to work in an evidence-informed manner, and as a researcher, I do believe data. The regime has political prisoners because it suits them. That's what we need to remember when we are thinking about sanctions. Our task is to make an issue of political prisoners for the regime to become a very uncomfortable one, and the one which would not suit them to continue what they're doing. As you rightly mentioned, Kryscina, so far we don't see any sanctions directed, targeted to those who perpetrate human rights violations. And that is a question of accountability, and that's what history and experience shows us, because targeted sanctions demonstrate to the regime that there is a price to pay. That none of that torture and terror which has been perpetrated in Belarus is going unnoticed. Some might argue that that might affect potential opportunities for diplomacy. However, as evidence and research shows us, targeted sanctions have worked historically. Therefore, again, when we are talking about bargaining with the regime, about using sanctions, there are no sanctions to be bargained with because there are no targeted sanctions so far.
Thank you. And now I would like to address Valeriy Kavaleuski.
Yeah, as a follow-up, and so I would agree with Andrej that nothing in Belarus has changed, other than political prisoners are being released. For 4 years, we've seen repressions being stronger, being a bit more kind of going on the plateau. But what we haven't seen is the releases of people. If we saw them, those were the result of diplomatic efforts. And we don't even know like what happened and who participated in those releases of people. However, until now, 178 people have been released, so a slightly bigger number. When we think about this process, we see this trajectory. We should be thinking how to facilitate this process of releases of people, what we can do to support these releases, and what we can do not to harm this process. So this also goes to certain issues. For example, the rhetoric, the communications. This is sort of the easiest part, and it can be impactful as well. For example, when I hear now repeated messages about from political leaders that we should pursue the regime change in Belarus, elimination of the regime. First of all, this is not what 2020 protest was about. It was about peaceful transfer of power, elections that would ensure that Belarus is a democratic state and power goes back to people. Regime change is not something that Belarusians are prepared for. This is not why people protested. They wanted peaceful change. This is not what our Western partners are ready for. The regime change is a rather toxic concept. Many governments have seen this, many governments have tried this, and this is complicated. This is costly, this is lengthy, and the outcome is very, very uncertain. And so, if at the very least, I would suggest to to review the rhetoric on these issues. When it comes to sanctions, we also understand that the pressure has been applied to the regime for 4 years, and a significant number of sanctions have been accumulated. We can separate them in 4 blocks: human rights, Ryanair, migration, and the war. And of course, until the war is over, nobody will be thinking about removing sanctions on the regime. Until migration crisis is resolved, no chance that the sanctions will be reconsidered. The same goes to the Ryanair hijacking and aviation security sanctions. However, sanctions that have been applied because of human rights violations in Belarus, this is a ready instrument that we could use at the moment. And if we are thinking now to impose sanctions while Lukashenko is releasing people, I don't think that this is necessarily a concept that would lead to more releases. If anything, Lukashenko might decide that he would want to retaliate. He will retaliate not against us, people sitting in Warsaw or in Vilnius. He will retaliate against people who are in Belarus, who are very vulnerable and easily accessible to him. And so when I see this window of opportunity, and I see it as such, until the election day at least, I would rather see what we can do to facilitate this process and not to harm this process. Thank you.
If I can continue your thought, and then Andrej will react. In 2021, you said that what's happening in Belarus, it's like black and white. There is no geopolitical undertone. Do you think that this window of opportunity, this is something like geopolitical undertone that suddenly appeared?
Question to me? Well, I think that geopolitical undertones were appeared when the war started and when Belarus found itself in a very dangerous situation, because this war threatens not only Ukraine but also Belarus, because Putin sees our countries in a similar light, and we have to make this choice where we will continue as an independent sovereign country, or if we cease to exist as such, because at the moment we're exactly on this path. Belarus is currently in a very precarious situation, and we have to recognize this. And as an alternative, joining the European family through integration with the European Union, I think this is the safe way for us to stay independent, to stay sovereign, and to retain our national identity. We see on the example of 27 countries that they have no problem with their national identity. They have no problem with their sovereignty and independence, and definitely that they have benefited a lot from the possibilities for social and economic development.
I want to react a little bit. History is cancelling some part of all corps of sanction in human rights, how it's been mentioned. It's very good matched with some strategy of power of hiding of terror. Because when we are cut at some sanctions about human rights, it's okay with human rights. And for European politicians and for US politicians, it's looking like, okay, we have some problems, but people going out from jails, and it's a positive, but we need to see negatives, not only positives. Of course, 178 people who going out from jail, it's big happy for their families and for these peoples, but we need to understand that it's just a game with very high prices. Lukashenko trying to sell these people like picture for some positive change in their system, and it's not true, and we need to say it. And when we're trying to game in this, like players in this game, we need to understand that Lukashenko plays in these games for 30 years. And he see many and many European politicians. He see many and many Belarusian activists who trying to play with him. But you see results. And for me, it's very important to be more grounded on the floor and not going to wishful thinking in these questions, because for us it's very important to be grounded, because how Valeriy said that the question of our existence about Belarus, about our future and possibility to going in a way of European family, but today I don't see these ways, because Belarus it's too aggressive in war, because Belarus treated like some blind place in a Europe map, and it's a big question what we can to do in this situation. And I strongly think that Lukashenko thinks that if you are cancelled something in pressure, it's a vulnerable position, because he is such guy from some rural places in which if you are say please, it's a vulnerable position. Okay.
Thank you. I just wanted to add to previous speakers. I will refrain from using a phrase window of opportunity. I'm not sure where that came from. I don't know if anybody knows, because I don't. I don't want it becoming viral, because to me seems that it is a bit of manipulative approach, because we need to recognize that we do not have a united strategy, and therefore releases which are currently happening and which we are discussing to try and connect them to a single effort of work which has been done, it is questionable. I do believe in data and I do believe in evidence, and so far I haven't seen any of that. Going back to 170 people being released, since July 2024, 433 people have been sentenced, and 7 people, major political figures, are still incommunicado. So again, I would refrain from viraling this phrase because I personally, and in my position, I do not feel comfortable about manipulating facts on such a big matter. Thank you.
Well, they're very, very difficult and basic issues we're debating here. And I go along with you, Valeriy, on the high responsibility we have. But I feel that here in the room and also here on our panel, we have very high responsibility when it comes to political prisoners. And you're right, it's easy to sit here in Berlin, have lunch and coffee and in Warsaw or Vilnius or somewhere else. So having said that, I think what we should do is, of course, make clear that we welcome the release of political prisoners. So that make this very clear. But the second thought or the second step is, why is it happening? We need an analysis of it, and we need a political idea of how to reward it or not to reward it. And this is very difficult. This is really difficult. And it is not the easy diplomatic way out, exit, to leave it here. But the point is, what is he aiming at by doing that? What we welcome. And so that was one point. The second is, I really have to say, frankly, that and I've written down on regime change. So I can clearly say that as a human being, as a citizen, I would like to see the regime change. But this is not my mission. The mission of any further government in your country is a decision to make by the people of Belarus. They are free to decide where to go and how to go and what to do, but they should be free to make the decision. And I think the unanswered question of everything is how to unify. And it's not only a matter in Belarus. When I look to Georgia, and many say Georgia is on the way, and I'm not comparing Ivanishvili with Lukashenko, I do not. But it's interesting to see these parallels drawn in the recent days. And we see, when we are sticking to the reality, there are many people in your country who doubt a Western vision for the country. And there are many, many who believe in that. And to make the bridge, to build the bridge, this is, I think, the unanswered question. But I really want to make clear, regime change, and especially the wording of it, is not a policy here. Of course, I would love to see the regime collapse, but it's not my mission. And the wording is important. My mission is an offer, and again, people should be free to make a choice, but they should be free to make a choice whether to go a European path or something in between, or Russian-leaning, whatever. But this is a discussion and an argument to be fought out democratically, and not by the means we see by this man.
Thank you for this comment, which I think it was important to somehow underline that this wording sometimes really matters. If nobody wants to react, I suppose to switch a bit our discussion into other field, because we've spoken enough about Lukashenko and about the regime. Let's speak a bit about New Belarus. Recognizing the limitations of international resistance and current Belarusian pro-democratic political figures have taken the initiative to build so-called structures in exile. Today we have here the representative of the United Transitional Cabinet, the former representative of the United Transitional Cabinet. There is also Office of Svetlana Tikhanovskaya and Coordination Council, which is something like proto-parliament. And these structures are pretty crucial for coordinating resistance efforts, mobilizing international support, preserving a democratic alternative to the current Lukashenko's regime. What could be done to strengthen these structures, and how the international community can help to keep Belarus on the agenda? So this is a question to all of you, and you can choose who will start.
Just very short, because I very often hear, and we have been discussing that very often, that there is a view on the situation sometimes in the country and outside in exile, if you wish, that the war against Ukraine is overshadowing the situation in Belarus and us dealing with that. This is not my experience. I'm experiencing an interest in Belarus here in Berlin, which has never been that intensive as it is in the last 2 years or 3 years. So this I really wanted to say, and this is maybe just one more sentence, and this is a task for us and a certain challenge too, when it comes to the new Bundestag. We'll be having probably, the Germans amongst you know that, on 23rd of February, if things go as planned, but probably yes. And this will be a challenge to bring the tradition of our efforts also in the new parliament, look out for new friends of Belarus, and to continue the work. So this will be crucial for us. But I wanted to make it on the attention for Belarus, which is really quite high, and it's never been like that before.
Thank you. Of course, spoiler, I don't have an answer. However, going back to what's been said here today and those institutions which you have already mentioned, Kryscina, I think structural approach is a key, because what we see just now is a democracy being built in exile, and any building, any new build always have snags when it's finished, and therefore there isn't a perfect building, you know, has been built yet without any work to be completed once it's finished and fixed. So what we're witnessing just now and what we're participating at is a building of something new which has not, Belarus did not have opportunity to build. And this leads me to my next point, that any structure consists of people. And working on a united front will help. I'm talking about Belarusian civil society and democratic forces of Belarus. Working as a united front will help our international partners to understand us better. Sending a united message will help our international partners not to be confused. As Valeriy mentioned, you know, new governments have to be educated all the time, because we cannot expect people coming to power to know about Belarus and using strong messages about terror, not repressions, is a very good example Andrej gave. And yet again, going back to the question of people, storytelling is the most powerful tool. Therefore, telling the world about what is happening in Belarus today in order to change things. This is our one of our main tasks. And we cannot expect our partners to automatically know about the extent of violations of human rights, which is happening in Belarus now. Thank you.
Thank you. First of all, I would start with the international agenda, place on the international agenda. I've always had a little bit of a problem with this goal, kind of to keep us high on the international agenda, when we know for certain that it does not necessarily imply practical steps. And kind of being high on the international agenda without practical implications, practical outcomes, is sort of a wasted opportunity or sort of empty target. Rather than that, I would focus on us being present in Belarus. This should be the #1 priority. So in the United Transitional Cabinet or any political structure, or office of Svetlana Tikhanovskaya, not the international team should be the #1 subdivision. Those people who work with Belarus should be #1 subdivision, and they should have ultimate resources and priority in time of political leaders. We have seen the opposite, and I think this is also one of the I would say one of the outcomes of this work, that when we see the election campaign, the most important one in 5 years, presidential campaign in Belarus, no matter how we call this, election, no election, doesn't matter. But Lukashenko is taking this process seriously. He has invested a lot of his time, of his energy, because this is about his survival. But this is also about our survival. This is about also our future and what we have come up with for these elections. Is there a disruptive campaign that would make Lukashenko uncomfortable, that would force him to change the plans, that would make him nervous? Not at all. We see that this probably would repeat the same campaign we've seen in the beginning of this year, parliamentary elections, when Lukashenko has done everything he wanted to do and left this campaign unscathed. This is probably the scenario that we should see until the voting day of January 26. There will be information campaign, there will be naming and shaming, but we understand that this does not leave much of an impact on Lukashenko's nerves. So when going further to the issue, what needs to be done to strengthen the democratic movement or political forces or political structures, and there is no clear definition like what we're talking about here. But speaking about political structures, I think this and the entire movement, it is necessary to have, again, an honest conversation. What has worked, what has not worked, what needs to be done differently. And probably we should remember about our ultimate goal and task of the democratic movement since 2020. We want free and fair elections. We want peaceful change. We want change. We don't want to live abroad and spread in all possible directions imaginable. Spreading our resources, spreading people, and spreading our attention as well. Thank you.
So, what I can add in this question, I try to focus on some practice things, because I'm a little bit practice guy in working with direct help and something, so I'm not a politician. And thanks God. How I see on quality of work of our politician representatives, office and cabinet and something so, I see on some practice results. And one of the practice results, it's creating of International Humanitarian Foundation. It's for me, it's one of the biggest point and biggest deal of the last years, because we're working with, like Knut already said, with traditions. Because when we are started some good tradition, for example, for support of Belarus in such way, like direct support from governments, it's a good tradition. And I hope that it's a start of big possibility and opportunity for our country in future. It's a new wave of cooperation, because all time before we just going with hand and ask for money for some European bureaucracy and something so. It's first time in our history, it's a situation in which Belarusian side and European side, it's equal in this process. Belarusian politicians going directly to government of European Union and decision together about this help. And it's a very big change for me of all this field. And my own organization make such possibility for increased twice direct help for political prisoners' families. And we make it just only with possibility of international humanitarian foundation. And okay, we say it about 4 years, it's a long time, it's nothing changed in Belarus, Tikhanovskaya doesn't work, Vechorka doesn't work, Stryzhak doesn't work, but we see situation that something new we see, something new changes. Of course, this change is not directly changed inside of Belarus, but it's about Belarus. It's about brighter. It's about our future and future possibilities for country after change. Because you see this history about coalition of European countries in help of Ukraine, directly coalitions, for example, drone coalitions, the mining coalitions, they are creating in a time of conflict. When they was prepared before this informal coalitions in some different ways, for example, in humanitarian ways, it will be easier for Ukraine to stand now against this Russian aggression. And we can now preparing, because for me it's nothing new in situations that war will to increase in Europe region. And now we can to make it. And we have instruments, we have representatives, we have some special instruments like humanitarian foundation and something so, and we need to use it because it's our big opportunities, and I think it's very good for us.
If I may, I have one. You want to react? Okay.
Sorry, I just wanted to reflect on something which was said here earlier by Valeriy when you were talking about need to review what worked and what hasn't. Again, tirelessly, I will be going back to people because people are our biggest value. So when we are talking about strategies which work and don't work, when we're talking about so-called elections strategy, what is the alternative to the current strategy proposed by Belarusian Democratic Forces, which does not involve people in Belarus being affected? Because I cannot see what could be done without risking people's lives in Belarus. Yeah. Thank you.
Well, in the first place, I think this is not exactly true. That this strategy helps to support people in Belarus, because we see that there are political prisoners and the number continues to grow. So can we say that we have done everything possible and necessary to stop repressions, to support the release of political prisoners from Belarus? I don't think so. Again, going back to the previous panel, when I was speaking about the availability of instruments in our hands now, which we could use to release people at the moment. This is our moral responsibility, knowing that people there are dying, that they are destroying their health, and if we wait for another death, would we be able to say, like, we could not stop it, when we knew that we could? And Lukashenko has signaled already that he is willing to talk not about all sanctions, not about lifting sanctions, but we could speak about suspension of sanctions. So this is one of the tools to speak about that. And in my opinion, if we were talking about the strategy today, about the next chapter, that would be about independence and people, on how we save the people without whom we cannot build a country, and independence without which the country would not be existing. So I would put these two pillars only at the moment as the strategy for democratic movement.
Thank you. When we speak about the structures that were built in exile by democratic forces of Belarus, it's not only about our political structures, it's also about other structures that were initiated by democratic forces of Belarus, such as groups of friends of Free Belarus in different countries, including Germany, including Czechia, and so on. And also last year, when this big gathering of the representatives of the groups happened here in Germany, an alliance was set up. And this year, this alliance of groups, parliamentary groups of Friends of Free Belarus, is going to meet in Italy, as far as I know, in the end of January. And my follow-up question to Mr. Abraham, what could be the outcome from this meeting, and how could we increase the efficiency of these parliamentary groups which try to support Belarus, democratic Belarus, in these difficult circumstances after the elections?
Well,
elections.
Frankly, I think that the way we are communicating amongst the groups is quite good. We don't know. I'm struggling a little bit because it doesn't always need a professional setting of institutions. So it is very good that every parliament in Europe is defining for itself what is the best way of setting up a group. We are Germans, so we are relatively formal, you know, and we have a board and we have members, and in other parliaments it's more ad hoc, yeah, that people meet on a certain question, and this is the political variety in Europe, and it should be reflected also in Belarusian affairs. But what we have in common and what we should concentrate on is first to continue to communicate amongst each other, so that and that is done on a day-to-day basis. So I'm sending an email to a colleague in Ireland or somewhere saying, have you heard that is the latest development? Or when we meet delegations as we did 2 weeks ago, I said, well, did you hear of the latest developments here and there? So and we should from time to time, but not annually, because it's very expensive, but from time to time we should meet to see each other. And I know that my colleague Mr. Kantorczyk from the Foreign Office was here, so the ground of the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe, for example, is an ideal ground for meeting. And what concerning the political work, there are two lanes. The one lane is the democratic forces of Belarus, very important cooperation, close cooperation, as we have been practicing that for years now. But on the other hand, putting pressure on our governments, to make clear what we expect them to do. And that's what we're debating. So sanctions, what kind of sanctions, no sanctions, lifting of sanctions, suspending sanctions. So we have to make clear, and when we do that on a coordinated way, we are strong because it's all over Europe, and we can put it also on the European agenda. I hope that was not the last chance, because I have two more points, but maybe in the last row.
Sorry. Thank you so much. Mr. Abraham, I will use these words as an open invitation to visit the Scottish Parliament, because I've been trying for 3 years, but I didn't find those words you have to establish a group, because we work closely with represent People's Consulate of Belarus in Scotland, and we work closely with Liberico program of godparents, which Victoria was talking about earlier. And we have, in the Scottish Parliament, we currently have 10 parliamentarians supporting Belarusian political prisoners. But I haven't found those words you just use of enthusiasm, you know, how to persuade them to start a group. So thank you for this.
There's no membership fee.
I'm writing this down.
For Scottish people, no membership fee.
Thank you. I think it's
rewarded by a free lunch later.
I think it's time to probably open the floor to the questions from the audience. And if there are no questions, we still have some questions from me about foreigners in Belarus and political prisoners and possible types of support to those who are released. So, does anybody want to ask something related to the so-called elections or generally political prisoners in Belarus? One hand.
Yeah, thank you. Viktor Susikov, Mission of Democratic Belarus in Brussels. I have a question. Actually, I understand that a question of political prisoners in Belarus is very sensitive and very touchy, but at the same time, it's extremely difficult question. I mean, related to the sanctions, related to the elections. I mean, all this bargaining. Okay, I mean, I'm not a politician, so I mean, I will not jump into this area. But there are a number of political prisoners that have been released, and they have been evacuated or managed to leave the country. Could you maybe elaborate on what kind of support do they get currently? Thank you.
Okay, this question to me, I think so.
Yeah, thank you. If I may, because I'm not so much familiar with elections which have been conducted during the last 10 to 15 years. So what are these elections actually about? I mean, who is... I heard there are some candidates. Are these just fake candidates who come every time? I heard there's one who's like has been there for 10 years or even more, 15 years. So how is this? I mean, is there any hope that maybe one of them is a bit more like, oh yeah, he could or she could maybe have another scenario? I'm just, it's. I understand it's not really. It's maybe a stupid question, but it's something I just want to know, because it's elections. So what are we talking about?
Probably the first question goes to Andrej Stryzhak.
Microphone. Oh, we have here. Okay. Support of released political prisoners and support of released political prisoners who going abroad from country, it's one of the main pillars of our work, like BYSOL Foundation, in coalition and in cooperation with our partners in the field. And we try to collect all possibilities what we have for such help. And for first, it's money for first time, which we can take for people. It's not such big amount. It's from 500 till 1,000 of euro. But for example, when you are released from jail, it's costs with which you can cover some debts from utility or something in your flat, and it's just a first step. Second step, it's possibility for have some support of evacuation or visa track. It depends. You have prohibition from leaving country or not. Third step, it's medical rehabilitation, which you can take in here in Europe or inside of Belarus. But inside of Belarus, it's not such easy way, but we still have possibility for make it with our partners. And it's of course some course of psychological help. And also we have, like BYSOL Foundation, we have special program for re-education, retraining of these people in new countries. Timely, it is a new profession, but we are focused more on some language courses, because people can stay in own profession and just be more attractive in some fair trade of labor markets, and they can find something for self. Every time we working for strengthness this system and making this more attractive, more fulfill for these people. And of course, it's about security. It's about possibility to take in this help inside Belarus. It's one of the big challenge. But if we say about Europe, of course we understand that when when wave of released people will increase, we need to be in more strong contact with national authorities of European Union and find some possibilities for complex rehabilitation of these people, because it's very it's very expensive. It's very expensive because we understand that totally destroying physical and psychical health, and for these people it's very problematic to cover by NGOs. It's a question of government level, and I compare this situation with veterans of Russian-Ukrainian war. In Ukraine, it's a government. Ukraine, it's a country, and they can to provide these governmental programs. Okay, they can work poor or good, but it's a governmental programs. Belarus, we have own country in a hybrid occupied situation, and we cannot use this money from budget, from a state budget. And in this situation, we strongly needed to support these programs of rehabilitation through such instruments like International Humanitarian Foundation. And it's very important for us to increase possibilities of these instruments and working more programmally, not like projectly or ad hoc, for people to show that if you are going out from jail and from country, you have some possibilities to renew your life, and you are not alone in this situation.
Thank you for that question, Gabriela. For raising what is election. Well, in a very few words, it's a very well staged theatre show, and it's not a pantomime. So if you look at candidates, there is a representative of a Communist Party, then there is Mr. Gajdukovic, who I had an unfortunate luck of going to school with.
It's younger one, second one.
It's a younger Well, surely me talking about going to school with him would indicate his age. So, and the third person, which obviously has been brought in for gender balance, is a former spokeswoman for the Interior Ministry, is she? She's but she has been on the Kanapatska, or that I haven't checked. But as you can see, there is no hope, and there is nobody who got registered and dared to register actually represents any hope for the future. No.
Any other questions? If no, probably my question will be the last one. Oh, you want to read?
Yeah, no, I think it's... no, please raise your question.
We often say that Belarusian prisoners, political prisoners, are our problem. But we forget that there are also foreigners, foreign citizens in Belarusian prisons on political grounds. What should be else done to make prisoners on political grounds in Belarusian prisons the problem not only of Belarusian democratic forces, but the world?
So how to handle the fate of foreigners being imprisoned in
and
Belarus?
How to change the rhetorics, taking into account that there are not only Belarusians in Belarusian prisons who are there because of politics.
Frankly, difficult for me to respond because there has been the one prominent case in the last month. So there was a German arrested, but I mean he was obviously arrested to have a hostage. for the deal, which was already planned when he was arrested, and this is maybe a good point for a general remark. If you are facing a regime doing things like that, there is not the slightest rest of trust. So what you can do is advise your citizens not to travel. This is a tragedy because it needs communication with ordinary people living, millions of your fellow countrymen living in the country. Yeah, it's a disaster. But what we do in the case of Russia, and I'm not quite aware, maybe someone knows on the Foreign Office, there are certainly useful information on how to travel Belarus. And this is how the loss of trust is harming everything. And maybe I use this opportunity, because I have to run, to say two points in the end. The first is, and really this is something I really mean, on the different groups and fractions and political parties and whoever represents the other side of Belarus, keep a certain unity. I remember, and my history with the deutsch-belarussische Gesellschaft goes back, and my cooperation with many political forces from Belarus to the mid-90s. And the problem has always been that you meet very interesting people who are mostly engaged in fighting. And this is a real danger. A real danger. So there should be debates, internal debates, and there I see so really differences in the approaches, but keep the unity. That was the big step forward with the transitional cabinet and with Mrs. Tikhanovskaya herself. So keep that. No single group of what is now combined will have a support as you not unified, but cooperating. Yeah, this is just an experience from many years. And the second is, and I go back to what Valeriy said, in every exile, and it is in a certain way an exile situation, the biggest challenge is the alienation to the home country. We know that from Germany too, decades ago, when people were here under our darkest regime, and I'm not comparing, but the situation, if you want to learn something, you have to compare. And people in exile, writers, intellectuals, politicians, when they came back to Germany, because of this missing communication, which of course was much more problematic back then, people inside the country, when they were returning, said, "You have no idea how we suffered, how we had to live." So the point of communication, but I'm not blaming anyone for that. I just wanted to underline it. And I don't see any ranking, by the way. It's a necessity anyway. And I know how difficult it is, but these 2 points I wanted to make before rushing into my election campaign again.
Thank you.
Can I add something? On the political prisoners who are foreign citizens, one of the instruments is the exchanges, and US and Russia have shown that it is possible. Also, we can look at the mechanisms between Ukraine and Russia. Russia and Ukraine are fighting every day on the battlefield, killing each other in hundreds and thousands. And at the same time, they simultaneously lead continuous talks on the exchanges, on the return of prisoners of war. And they celebrate every life that they can save through such exchanges. They bring back bodies, they bring back people and children. And this what means to have it as a priority, to bring back people. And actually, on June 27 this year, Ukraine and Russia have reached a deal to return 5 political prisoners who were in Belarusian prisons back to Ukraine. So again, I agree with Knut that the regime is not trustworthy, that they have failed a lot and they have deceived a lot. But sometimes they make deals and they stick to those deals, and we need to ensure that we find the opportunities to make deals as well, to release people, either foreign citizens or Belarusians, from prisons. Thank you.
So it was the last input. Not the last. Last word.
Last word. For Belarusian participants of Minsk Forum, you can see results of our clausur, which were making previously for this meeting, and you can just look how many green points on teams which were hanging on the wall, and it's about priority of what it's really interesting for us, like expert community, and of course political prisoners question. It's one of the first, and the second one, it's Euro integration, Knut. Yeah.
So thanks for your participation, and I think that our panelists deserve applause.